My name is Jim London. Today is July the 20th, 2016. We're in the law offices of Butler, Vines, and Babb. We're here today to interview Bill Vines, who is the senior and founding partner of the firm. Bill, tell us a little bit about your education and your background.
I am a UT graduate in 1965. In those days, you could go through on an accelerated program. It just took 5 years to get to be a lawyer, and I did that. Then I practiced in a loose association for a while, and the firm that you mentioned, we formed in 1973, and I've practiced there ever since.
Where did you grow up?
In Kingsport, and then came to Knoxville in 1960.
Okay. Is there anything about growing up that led you to become a lawyer?
Oh, I was involved in dramatics and also on the debate team. We were successful. Got actually, I think, second in the state in high school, and that sort of set the stage. I didn't want to work.
And how long have you been practicing all total?
50 years, a little over 50 years.
Are you still practicing full-time today?
Absolutely.
All right. Tell us a little bit about your practice. What kind of cases do you handle today?
Well, today, primarily it would be more in the way of medical negligence cases, but some of a lot of things, and a fair amount of mediation. Earlier, that was not exactly my practice.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your practice over the last 50 years. What kind of cases did you start off with, and how has it evolved over time?
I primarily did civil defense work in the beginning, and then in the, say, mid-'70s to into the '90s, I was very heavily involved in the asbestos litigation and became a regional counsel, so I had like 7 or 8 states, and if a case went to trial, I would jump on an airplane and go wherever that was and try the case. I indicated I've always had some medical negligence cases. I tried a medical negligence case my first year of practice in federal court, and then that has grown now to the point that I handle substantially a significant part of the practice would be medical negligence.
These medical negligence cases, what geographic area do you handle these cases in?
Well, I have tried this a couple of years ago, tried one in Michigan, and I have been in other states, but primarily just in East Tennessee.
Okay. At one point, did you hold an office with the Bar Association?
Yeah, I was on the Board of Governors for a number of years, and then was secretary, and then I was president of the bar in 1986.
Okay. Can you tell us, in your understanding, what's the difference of the Bar Association in 1986 and today, which is 2016?
For the president, there's a pretty big difference. We had, now I think we have 5 or 6 excellent, wonderful employees in the Bar Association office. At that time, we had 1 part-time person, and she primarily did lawyer referral service. So the president handled most of the administrative matters, and at that time, your assistant had a stack of Bar Association stationery, and if something went out, it was actually typed in the president's office, and you were the administrative officer. Your practice really took a hit when you were the president of the bar in 1986, which doesn't, by the way, seem that far back to me.
Did you gain any perspectives in dealing with the public as president of the Knoxville Bar Association?
Then, and maybe today, but then the clerks of the court had a little sticky note with the name of the president of the bar. So if somebody called complaining about a lawyer or complaining about a judge or complaining about the legal system, they would give them the president of the bar. So it was like a giant invisible funnel that funneled all the disgruntled people to you. And I spent a lot of time answering phone calls. Almost all of the issues were lack of communication. Once you explain things and explain that their lawyer was probably doing the right thing, then that would usually take care of the problem.
And today we've got grievance committees and hearing officers and even the Board of Professional Responsibility handling some of those challenges, I suspect.
Yeah. It's much of it was involved the president at that time.
So you were very hands-on.
Yeah, right, and I tried my best to resolve things. I even would go back and forth between lawyers sometimes. A lawyer would have a complaint against another lawyer, and I'd try to referee.
Now, we've talked about your medical negligence cases, and that's the primary thrust of your representation today. Do you have any special arrangements with regards to the handling of medical negligence cases?
Yeah, I'm in better shape on that than ever. I have a physician that works here and also a nurse, and if they quit, I'm going to quit.
Have there been instances in your law practice you believe would be of special interest or maybe even humorous for this group?
A number. What comes to mind, I mentioned that I do a fair amount of mediation. And one case we're mediating right here in this building. And sometimes I go in, as I know you do, to meet the people ahead of time and tell them, you can work very hard and so forth. So I went in the room where the plaintiffs were, and the plaintiffs were represented by a lawyer I had a lot of respect for, a well-known lawyer. And as soon as I walked in the room, his clients said to me, "We'd like to talk to you privately." And I said, "No, I have to talk to you in front of your lawyer." And the lawyer said, "Oh, no, that's fine." And he left the room. As soon as the door closed, they said, "Our lawyer's just told us what he's going to do, and we think that's malpractice. We want you to sue him." That's how the mediation started. We got it settled. I have two other instances, if you'd like me that come to mind. Tried a case in another county, a county that's not populous, where there were only two surgeons, and the defendant was one of these surgeons, well known. Hard to find a jury, hard to pick a jury. And the jury came in with a verdict, and the foreperson said they had a verdict, and asked the judge, said, "Before we give you the verdict, we'd like to make a statement." Well, as you know, that's not good, because if you have gotten a successful verdict, if the jury just reports, there's not much you can do about it. But if the jury makes some statements and you get involved in what went on in the jury room, sometimes it might give you a chance for a new trial. So oh no, boy, this is not going well. But the foreperson said, "All of us know and some of us love," and named the defendant. Well, that's it. It's over. And then the foreperson said, "But if you make a mistake, you got to pay for it." And they gave $1.1 million, I think, $1.2 million maybe. One other instance that I will mention be interesting to lawyers, one of those asbestos cases I tried in St. Louis, Missouri, and won it. It was a death cancer case, and it was back for the motion for new trial. The plaintiff's lawyer, who was a well-known lawyer nationally, argued for a new trial, and I got up to argue against the new trial, and I hadn't gotten more than a paragraph out, and the judge said, "New trial granted." And I said, "Well, Your Honor, respectfully, may I be further heard on that?" And he said, "No, but I will tell you this, if it's tried again and you win that, I'm probably going to grant another new trial. So that gave me a pretty good idea of how the judge thought about the defense in that case. So if you're in trial law, you have a lot of interest. It's an interesting profession, as you know, and you have a lot of interesting things.
Well, certainly you're one of the best in our profession. Talk to me a little bit about your outside hobbies and interests. What do you like to do when you're not working?
Well, I do have a number of those. I like to fly. I have a multi-engine rating and instrument, and as you know, like to trout fish, still snow ski. Have a little place down on the lake where we do some lake activities. But my toy is up in the mountains. We've got a place up there, and I'm out there slinging a chainsaw around most weekends.
Hey, you look like you're very physically fit. Do you work out, jog? How do you stay in shape?
Well, I used to jog. Now I waddle, and I do that in the mornings.
During your time in your practice, are there social changes that you feel are of special note?
Yeah. In reflecting for this, there was in high school. You asked me where I grew up there, and I came down in 1960, and that's not that far back. There was complete and total segregation. We had no black people in our high school, and it was just starting to change, and certainly should have in college, which is a big change. Another big change is the number of female attorneys that are involved in the profession. In my class, there was one female. She was gorgeous, by the way, and some of us didn't want to get a class with her. It's hard to concentrate. But there's one person. I understand that about 50% of the lawyers graduating are female, and that's a good change.
Are there changes in the law practice that have been helpful or even hurtful?
Well, let's talk about helpful. I think that the answer to most problems for human beings is the ability to communicate. If you have good communication, you have fewer divorces, fewer conflicts, fewer wars. And this mediation process that now we're all involved in, and I do a fair amount, has really been a big change for the law business, where we come together and reach across the table and see if we can't come to an agreement. And they're between 80 and 90% successful, which is a huge percentage for anything involving human endeavor. So I think that's a big change. For me, another big change is the cell phone. See, we didn't have anything like that when we started. I'm a big advocate of talking, and I think you are personally, to try to resolve a problem. And so the cell phone is a real time saver. I can be up there in the mountains, and by the time I get back to the office, I've made all my calls. So I think those are big changes. Electronics has changed most professions, and certainly has changed ours.
We've talked of a couple of things that you found have been helpful, such as the cell phone and those mediation. Talk about things that maybe have been hurtful to the profession over the last 10 to 20 years.
I wish that we could have some reasonable controls on lawyer advertising. During the first few years that I was in practice, we had a lawyer sued by the Bar Association here in Knoxville for soliciting business. Not by going on TV or radio and trying to solicit business, but made some contact, and the Bar Association sued him for disbarment. That's how strongly lawyers felt about that. Now, of course, after Bates versus Arizona, then the door has just opened, and in my view, too wide. So now we have lawyers' faces on buses. And that has not been good for the profession overall. It has given an impression to the public that that what we do, what you and I do, what many lawyers do in the civil trial arena may not be very professional. And I hate that because I've always been very proud of being a lawyer. And so I wish that we could have some better restrictions on that advertising.
With 50 years of legal experience under your belt, as we look forward into the future, what do you see as far as the practice of law looking forward?
I think that there will be some changes. Overall, I'm optimistic. I think that the reason that I'm optimistic is because of the good communication that we have. I don't watch a lot of TV, but if I do, I usually turn on something like what's called the Bloomberg channel. And there I will see at 9 o'clock at night, we're seeing what the stock market's doing in Australia and Japan and all over. And there's just good communication. That bodes well for the future, for not only the law business, but for peace in the world.
Do you ever regret becoming a lawyer?
No. I have overall been proud to be a lawyer and would recommend that to young folks.
What advice would you give for future lawyers?
Well, I was given some advice that I thought was self-serving when I started. And that I remember going in on a case complaining about the fee. It didn't look like there was going to be much fee in the case. This lawyer had given me a case to handle that I was associated with. And he said, let me tell you, you just work hard and the money will come. Well, I thought, he's just trying to get me to work hard on the cases. But boy, on reflection, that was good advice. And I would think that would be good advice. I think that the main thing that lawyers need to work on is their reputation. You can do more with a good reputation than you can with good knowledge of the law, because you're respected by your peers. I see sometimes lawyers overstating their position when they're arguing something, and that doesn't help you any. And one other thing that I would recommend is not to blame the other lawyer. You and I see sometimes in somebody arguing a motion for continuance or whatever, and it's always the other lawyer's fault. You know, they didn't do anything to get the case behind. It's the other lawyer's fault, and people can see through that. And I think the last thing that comes to my mind is to not ever, in effect, threaten another lawyer. The largest verdict I ever collected was $9.2 million, and that case, numbers of lawyers had turned it down, and I agreed to look at it and decided to call it was involved a New York bank. And I decided to just call and see if there was any chance we could meet and talk and see if there was a way to work things out. And I got a call back from the senior partner of a big Wall Street law firm. And he said, how many lawyers do you have in your firm? Well, we just had a handful. He said, well, on that one case alone, I can put 7 lawyers and at least that many legal assistants. And we can bury you in paper, and it'll ruin your law practice. You don't want to take that case. Well, I hung up the phone and I said, I'm in. You don't want to do anything like that. You want to be respectful of the other lawyer and try to gain a reputation that you are willing to consider both sides of a case and try to work it out. Because what we do is not just to win or lose. We're trying to solve conflicts for people. And the best way to do that is to be able to communicate.
Now, you are certainly one of the most respected trial lawyers in our area. What do you see with regards to the future of trial lawyers?
Well, with regard to trial lawyering, the trial work, I do see there'll be some changes. I think there'll be more alternate dispute resolution, be more mediation, maybe arbitration, maybe in our field, medical health law, maybe health courts. We were taught that you want to learn to try cases. I was advised, bad advice, at one point, don't you ever talk settlement. You want to have a reputation that you go try cases. The problem with that advice is that was emphasizing the lawyer, and we need to emphasize the client. The client doesn't want to try a case. The client wants a case resolved. All clients want cases resolved, of course in their favor, but resolved. And the trial work, Jim, we have to admit is costly. It takes a long time. It's stressful. We've tried a lot of cases. And I've never had a client come out and say, I want to do that again. It's a stressful process. And the thing about trial work that is means that we may see some change is that it's unsure. You know, we can try the case to 10 different juries. You're going to get 10 different verdicts, and sometimes they're way different apart, and so it's an inconsistent procedure. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see some changes that encourage communication and discourage the actual trial of cases.
We've talked a great deal about your professional practice. You also indicated you have some outside interests, flying and fishing. What advice, if any, would you give to those concerning outside interests?
Well, I would certainly suggest that if you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. So if there are things you want to do, go on and do them. I advise involve your family, but if you want to scuba dive, scuba dive. You want to jump out of airplanes, jump. Use a parachute. But be involved in things and keep up. That's one of the things that I'm a little worried about in the future. That is apathy. Particularly among young people. When I was in high school and down at law school, we always had the newspaper around, and we read a newspaper every day. I read 3 today, and you try to keep up. And I don't see that with young folks. I don't see that they're reading a newspaper. If you ask them, they're going to tell you they get their news off the internet, but that's not a compact source for and a regularly available source. I think it was Gore Vidal said that only 50% of the people vote. Only 50% of the people read a newspaper. Let's hope it's the same 50%. If you're going to be a good citizen, you need to be well informed. So that is something that I would say for the future that I have some concerns about. And I have some concern, if I can keep going on there with your question about concerns for the future, about the idea that I'm seeing that is very protectionist of of countries. As I mentioned before, everything is communication. I was born in World War II, came up right after World War II, and all the things you hear about that. And then there was the Korean War, and then the Vietnam War, where I might have been injured, and actually was a pallbearer at one of my good friends' funerals, which is awful. But you know, if you look back, the Japanese didn't want they attacked Pearl Harbor, but they didn't want to go swimming at Waikiki Beach. We put an oil embargo on them. If there's not good trade and communication between countries, you run the risk of another war, and people seem to forget how horrible that is. But it's bad, and we don't want to do that. We want to solve our disputes in some other way. So for the future I would hope that everybody would realize we need to build bridges, not walls.
With regards to your career over the last 50 years, are there anything that you're particularly proud of as far as accomplishments?
Well, I have been proud of representing clients and have felt satisfied. I had one mediation where one party actually physically struck another party, and then we 5 o'clock that afternoon we had the case settled. They're hugging. I felt like I'm doing good things. I've been personally proud that I have done a lot of different things. I mentioned, the flying and being in the mountains and so forth, and so I have had a lot of interest. I don't do nothing very well. And by the way, I'm not done.